A very good evening to all of you, and thank you very much for joining us this Friday. This is the 14th webinar that we are conducting in our series of webinars every Friday. We are excited today as well. We have a very distinguished guest, Dr. Mrityunjay Athreya, the doyen of management education, thought and practice today with us. A special welcome to all his esteemed friends and special invitees from around the world who have actually taken their time and joy to join this session from India, US, Germany, and a few other countries and other cities in India itself. Welcome to all of you, sirs. And I also welcome other members who have joined in the right time to listen to this very, very interesting topic that we have today. Today, we are going to talk about the China story, lessons for Indian industry. And before we get into the topic, I want to request just 1 minute or so that I can introduce our distinguished guest with us. Good evening, sir. Dr. Mrityunjay Athreya Garu. Good evening. Sir.
Good evening. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So agenda is very simple. So we have about 30 minutes wherein you will deliver your talk, and the next 30 minutes, we will moderate the session with the questions raised by our audience and some of the questions which we will pick up during the conversation also. And Professor R. Prasad, who is Director for Academic Wing at ICFAI Group, Hyderabad, he's going to initiate the moderation, and I will also raise a few questions. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Mrityunjay Athreya, and I take pleasure in introducing, it's a very, very big profile and it will take time, but I'll try my best to introduce in a few lines. Dr. Athreya studied in the University of Madras, his first degree in statistics in Loyola College, and is also a qualified cost accountant with All India first rank and gold medals in both intermediate and final examinations of the Institute of Cost Accountants. He studied at Stanford Business School and he obtained doctorate in business administration from the prestigious Harvard Business School. Long journey of exposure and experience in India and abroad. He has been an exponent on various practices in management, both for government as well as private entities. And as an icon, to name a few, in 1971, he was invited by Dr. Karan Singh, the then Minister of Civil Aviation, to restructure Air India. And he was on several committees along with distinguished members like Dr. Vijay Kelkar. He was also a member of the Committee to Restructure State Enterprises of Jammu and Kashmir State in 1972, and he's been on several other committees on coal, civil aviation, civil nuclear power, and he was for 2 terms member of the RBI Committee for Selection of Top Executives in Public Sector Banks, along with Dr. C. Rangarajan, Dr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, Dr. Y.V.R. Reddy, and others. And I would like to take one moment to mention that Dr. C. Rangarajan is the Chancellor of our deemed university in Hyderabad, that is the ICFAI Foundation for Higher Education. And I shared this information with Dr. C. Rangarajan that Dr. Athreya is speaking today in our webinar. He has received the information, sir. Dr. Athreya received several awards. He has been awarded the Lifetime Contribution Award by Thinkers 50 India, and the Government of India has decorated him with the prestigious Padma Bhushan Award as well. With this brief introduction and subsequently other things we'll cover, but I would like to request Dr. Athreya to start his talk. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We now start with the talk. Over to Dr. Mrityunjay Athreya.
Thank you very much, Sudhakar Rao. Thanks to ICFAI for this opportunity. I evaluate and look forward to a very good session and questions later following my talk. May I request you to please operate the PowerPoint for me? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to, on your behalf and myself, appreciate Mr. Sudhakar Rao, Director ICFAI and in charge of branding, in organizing these talks. Getting a weekly speaker is very difficult, and he has done it for 14 weeks now, one after the other, without missing them. And very good names, as you would have seen from the flyer. I don't know how many of you noticed in the early announcement, it was called the webinar. webinar plus a tribute to Charminar of Hyderabad, a major landmark there. I lived in Hyderabad for a short while in 1979, love that city, have been back many times, and we look forward. I am also a Jamai, son-in-law of Hyderabad. My parents-in-law are from Hyderabad. I had originally given the title The China Challenge, but on Mr. Sudhakar Rao's expert advice as a brand builder, I took the story. And I had also said challenge for Indian industry. We are now putting it a more positive spin on it, lessons for Indian industry. Okay, next slide. You can just see China sitting on top of India on the north. For centuries, we thought Himalayas of the huge geographical size difference. And the Himalayas are no longer a difference for us. They can come down anytime as they did in 62, again last year in Galwan. Okay, that's about me. Next slide. I'd like to first start with the high growth of China. Actually, the term high is not an adequate description. The rapid growth of China. And from that, the lessons, three sets of lessons I am taking. One is in manufacturing, which has been their major success. They have not been as successful as in the services as India has been with many good IT companies. But if they want, they can catch up any time. But they are the world's largest manufacturer, as you will see in one of the charts following. So we have many lessons to pick from them from manufacturing. How did they handle this volume of manufacture? How was it sold, distributed? And within China, most of it was exports worldwide. So there are marketing lessons here as well that we can pick up. And finally, one of the constraints on growth in India is the need for huge capital expenditure and finance. By the time we finish the government salaries, defense, and interest payments, there is not much left for basics like health and insurance, education, but even less for industrial investment infrastructure. And I'd like to finally conclude with what I presume to call, if I may submit to you, your action plan for consideration. Those of you who have listened to me before in any context would know that I always end with an action plan. There is no point in just discussing concepts and ideas and data. What are we going to do with it? And I think your action on this is very critical as we see the size of the problem. So if you look at the high growth of China, China was struggling like India between 1950 and 1980. As long as Mao was alive, it was going through many convulsions, the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution, back to the farms, collective farming. So China did not grow very much. You will see in one of the later slides, a flat curve between 50 and 1980. Deng Xiaoping fortunately came to power. China, it is very unpredictable, as you know, power struggle. He was one of the candidates. After 3 years after Mao's death, he became president of the party. And he was a wise man. He realized the need for economic growth, manufacturing, cooperation. So he instituted the economic reforms, the special economic zones. And out of that, in the next 20 years, China became the world's largest manufacturer. It has a 28% share of global manufacturing. The next is the United States with 14%. India has a 3% share. So where are we in comparison? And this growth could not have been by the domestic market. There wasn't enough income in the people. There wasn't enough demand. So it was a massive export-led growth. Here is the growth decade by decade. Around 1960s, it was just 4%. It shot up to 10% plus in the 2000s. For a 20-year period, it stayed at near 10% plus. In money terms, they grew 14%, less inflation. This is in real terms. And the 2008 financial crisis, global crisis, coming out of Wall Street, hit them as any other country. Hit us as well. But they have shown resilience at every step, quick recovery and back to growth. And relative terms, they're still growing higher. For example, the global growth around 2 to 3%, but they've been growing at 5% plus. As they were recovering, even before the 2008 crisis, there was the Y2K in 2000, and now the pandemic last year. So the Even in 2020, where the whole world was shrinking and India's GDP shrank by minus 14%, they managed to expand by 2.3. There's only one quarter in which their GDP went down. So this is not the most important chart. We are looking at the long-term growth. Uh, the but this one gives you an idea that even in difficult conditions, only in Q1 it went to minus 6.8, and this Q1 2021 they are back up to 18.3. Of course, that 18 is high; it's on a low base, and you may have seen the IMF estimate for India in 21-22 financial year is 9.5%. We would have lost 2 years of economic growth, and it will be very hard to make up that lost GDP. So what are the lessons in manufacturing? I think the Chinese have been able to rapidly scale up from a very poor situation in Mao's death in 1976, Deng coming into power in 79, starting in 1980. Within the next few years, they got foreign capital, foreign technology, foreign investment, assured human resources, labor, discipline, and built up huge scales in manufacturing. And also did the training and development, the skills in various areas. We still have a lot of semi-skilled, unskilled labor, contract labor, migrant labor from the rural areas, and it was very badly exposed last year during the pandemic, and again in the second wave, second migration. So they invested in skill development and got their people ready for these jobs and worthy of these jobs, so that the investment will stay and continue. They have also achieved phenomenal productivity per person, industry after industry. If we make comparisons, because of the capital investment, the high technology, and the skills together, it is not that their people are working physically harder or longer, which they are doing, but the factors of capital and technology have vastly raised their productivity. And also originally considered cheap goods, poor quality or adequate quality, now rising quality. They are competing in 5G, they are in space, they are in military technology. They have a plan for 2027 for their military. They make a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year plan. Xi Jinping has a dream for China. They are now planning for the 2049 Chinese government's centenary, well ahead. So they have also raised the quality. And another thing that we need to learn, that they're extremely good at project management. Not only ordinary projects, but mega projects like the Three Gorges Dam, the development of Pudong next to Shanghai, the industrial estate. Some of you may remember the pathetic comparison of our Asian Games 2010 and the China Olympics in 2008. And they put up the world's best ever Olympic show in 2008. So they were able to handle multi-billion-dollar projects. In India, we have had a history of consistently project time overrun, cost overrun, post-completion quality problems, long time, what we call gestation period, comfortably, quite a while to work up to full capacity. They hit the ground running and project is commissioned, they're off to very high capacity utilization very quickly. I think these are things that we need to learn in Indian manufacturing. One or two companies in India have come near this standard. The way Jio has rolled out telecom, mass expansion of their petrochemicals, the Tata's group have put up their plants. Now here you have the history of Chinese product GDP from 1952, and you will see that it is flat practically till 1980. So Korean War, the Great Leap Forward, Cultural Revolution. I have traveled many times to China in the 1980s, 90s, and Chinese intellectuals and managers talk about a lost decade, the decade of 1966 to 76, when Mao had the Cultural Revolution. It was lost for the economy. It lost a lot of talent. It sent people to the farms. And then there is the SEZ, Special Economic Zones. Things have begun to move. There is a learning curve, about 10, 12 years, 80 to 1992. The growth rate is slowly rising, and then exponential growth thereafter. This is known to all statisticians, that if the conditions are right, initially there will be moderate growth, and then there will be exponential, and then at some point the Chinese growth is asymptotic, parallel to the y-axis. But of course it has to end at some point, and it is tapering off a little later now. So here is a forecast till 2026, next 5 years. China will continue to grow with around 5%. Now we should not look at that 5% as small on a huge base. 7 times the Indian GDP, 5% is a massive addition year after year. It is much more than India adding a 10% per annum on a lower base. So it's an amazing ability to do that. And they're going to do it with less dependence on export this time because of the global hostile environment and various kinds of people catching up with their currency manipulation, stealing technology, copying technology, and so on. Now they are going to rely more on domestic market. They also need this for political stability, to keep the party in power. They're going to allow people more consumption and good lifestyles. So exports here is a dramatic chart where China's share has gone up from 2 to 14%, whereas the Indian share is still between 1 to 2%. Every percentage share will create a few million jobs in the country. And I think the idea of Make in India was to get investment to make for the domestic market as well as for exports. I think we have been struggling to improve the ease of doing business. I think the solution in the long run may not be in the hands of politicians, because they are in parties, there are competition elections, already opposition is moving in various ways to paralyze parliament. So politically we are a bit divided. Democracy is good, provided you are not surrounded by two neighbors like China and Pakistan. Second is that the bureaucracy is already busy with law and order, basic education, health, defense, and so on. So I think it is not their particular distinctive competence. It is industry, which as I will come to later, which has to conceive of the ideas, persuade government and officials, the people. So there are also marketing lessons. I think the Chinese realize that to get high volumes, you have to go for a low profit margin, very low. And they were primarily interested in getting their people fully employed, paid good salaries. That gave them the tax revenue and people the opportunity to spend, and they were quite happy. This is, I think, a big difference between public enterprise and private enterprise, and in this case, it is very efficiently run because of the party direction, discipline, and global distribution. Of course, they were helped by their investors who had their own distribution network, but gradually Chinese companies also started coming up, and they very quick learning curve. Japan learned from the West between 1950, the end of the World War, and the next 20 years. It was also known in my school and college days as a cheap products country, but they have built up enormous quality and a global distribution and world scale brands. The Chinese have also built brands. It is not that they've stayed with low margin, high volume, ordinary pedestrian, unbranded commodity products. They built brands, and we can see in many fields like consumer durables, telecom, of course, automobiles, and then they are very flexible in pricing. They may have one pricing for the mass market, but I think they will meet the customer need, the volume-based pricing, marginal cost pricing, and deferred profit pricing. So they have this huge flexibility in pricing. They don't have the problems of shareholders, dividends, governance. Now they're beginning to have listing and so on. And then the huge problem of logistics management. They have built this container industry, ports of various kinds, access to ports around the world, the BRI now. I think we have several bridges to cross before we can even come to half the Chinese manufacturing, 14% share of the world. Our population is 14% of the world, but we are nowhere near 40% share of world manufacturing. We will never get to Chinese style 28. It is the manufacturing superpower. There you are at 28.7%. The United States is next at 17. Even mighty Japan, 7.5. India at a measly 3%. There's a long way to go for us. We should have been by now at least at 10%. By 1980, our savings rate was 24%. Our main culprit is the capital output ratio. Because of the poor project management, infrastructure facilities, access to water, electricity, connections, corruption, various kinds of problems, the investment has not been as productive. So we have had a 4 plus capital output ratio, though the 24% has given us 5 to 6% maximum. The economist has quite rightly said that given India's infrastructure and community constraints, the maximum potential rate of growth is 7%. So unless we break this barrier and go to 10% for 10 years, we will not come anywhere near. And the more we allow the differential, 1 to 5, 1 to 7, the more it will be also a military hazard for us. The export-led growth has been going on, as you can see, as percentage of the GDP, around hovering around 18. It hit a maximum of 36. Yeah, so that means that it is not flagging. There are some hopes for India, minor issues. China is worried that its population will gradually drop. It is aging already. And therefore, as you know, they've come up with the 3-child policy. But the Chinese have got used to 1 child, 2 children, no child, and a certain style of living. Worldwide, I think there is a reluctance to have large families. Everywhere, the net reproduction rate is dropping below 2. So the Chinese population will go towards 1.1 billion, and India will be at 1.4. They are worried about this. They are open to huge FDI. We have been worrying about FDI, its impact, various kinds of controls. We've been fiddling with percentages, sectors, locations. They were very open in their coastal areas first, and then gradually going up to all the 36 provinces, and not afraid, by actually using the FDI as a hostage, through it getting technology, marketing, brand, supervision, management, all these experiences. They have a much higher debt capacity on their balance sheet. We are very vulnerable to debt because of the market conditions, banks, the need for avoiding bad debts. But if you have an assured export market and a state behind you, you can take on more debt on the capital structure. Many Indian companies, as you know, are going for zero debt, which is not a good policy. 0.5 to 1, 1:1 would be all right if you want to grow. They have been massively reinvesting. No dividends, no bonus shares, no stock options, reinvesting in growth. So they've achieved unbelievable savings ratio of 36% of GDP, sometimes going to 40. In the West, it is hovering around 8 to 12%. In some years, the US has had negative savings rates, people spending more than they receive. The 2008 financial crisis and the pandemic have improved the savings rate in the West. Now, these are short-term projections. This is to main point here is the Chinese resilience. We are all hit by the same problem, but how quickly they recover back and keep running. I would now like to conclude in the last 5 minutes available to me, and then 7 o'clock we open it for your comments and questions. You may already be putting them into the chat box. As Sudhakar Rao said, Dr. Prasad and he will manage those questions, and I'll be happy to respond. We can go a little bit beyond 7:30, though some of you are interested. What we need is the leadership of the Indian industry, but it cannot lead from above. It cannot lead from front. It has to be a servant of politics and of civil service and lead from below, based on their industrial expertise as a cooperative exercise in national interest, without challenging the authority of government, but submitting to government huge plans, massive plans for Indian growth, sector by sector, province by province, state by state, and how they can be invested. So they have to do some work, preparatory work like R&D for growth. For example, companies like Bechtel spend 1% of their revenue on research into new projects, spend $12 million in preparing a project report, and they then
offer it to their clients. Out of 10, 5 projects come, 5 don't. They write off those amounts. So here I'm requesting Indian top industrialists and top managers, where there is now an excellent partnership. The third and fourth generation of family businesses are highly qualified, both in engineering and as MBAs, and they and managers who are also qualified have a partnership, and they have to work together in the interest of India and to catch up with China. There may be Quad, there may be global US-EU collaboration in containing China, but we are the frontline state. We are the biggest neighbor to China. Will bear the brunt of Chinese hegemony and their ambitions of various kinds. And they will not cooperate with our growth. They will try to create various kinds of problems. So we have now made it difficult for ourselves by delaying it by about 40 years. But still, it has to be done. I would appeal to, in all sectors, not only the software export sector, but I think manufacturing is critical. Metals, engineering products, automobiles, components, pharmaceuticals, consumer goods. There are several sectors where we can, for example, we can do things. The Orissa government has surprised all of us by offering tap water to people all over the city of Puri. And they have a plan to do it in the rest of the country. The country has a plan now. This was not done in Gujarat or Maharashtra or Karnataka. It was done in Orissa, not considered great by most of us. We have to create interest in politicians, officials. There will be problems. Politicians come and go. Officials also, the senior levels, they have short tenures of 1 to 2 years. But we have to work with the system. We have no option. And contact from the cabinet secretary to the joint secretary, get more people involved so that somebody will remain when the others have been transferred. So create interest. So in a way, take charge as servants from behind with humility. We have to demonstrate the model in a few huge mega projects over large areas of particular states, like China did in the SEZ, and then replicate that model around the country. So individual companies, their plans, their growth are all right, but they will not get us to 10 to 14% of world manufacturing share. They will not give full employment to our people. Our unemployment has risen. It is one of the highest in the world, 10%. So I think this seems to be the only solution. The only other solution is to get some foreign country to come and manage the economy for us. So I hope that we will all rise to this occasion. And I plead that our managers who are listening, put it up to the top managements that in their sector, like Reliance, like Tata's, let them think of mega projects and take it forward. For example, we have an outstanding investment by Ola, the largest two-wheeler plant in the world in Chennai. I think we need more projects like that. Thank you very much. I look forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you very much, sir. That's a very, very interesting masterclass on China versus India, and more importantly, the significant lessons that India can learn from the growth story of China. Pretty interesting, sir. I must thank you for putting it in such a nice manner, learning simplified as we call it. I will also now invite Professor R. Prasad, who is the Director for Academic Wing. Professor R. Prasad is an alumnus of IIT Bombay and IIM Calcutta, where you taught, sir.
Okay,
and,
very good.
Ladies and gentlemen, I must tell you that
Right.
Dr. Mrityunjay Athreya taught at IIM Calcutta as well as London Business School, among many other several interesting institutions across the world. So Professor R. Prasad heads the academic wing, and he also is the architect of the latest online MBA program that we have launched. And he calls it Learning Simplified. Like the way you have made learning simplified for us, he is also making the online MBA Learning Simplified. So I now very heartily welcome Professor R. Prasad to initiate the Q&A session, and the first cluster of questions will be taken up by Professor Prasad. Over to you.
Thank you, Professor Sudhakar Rao. Very good evening, sir. It is indeed an honor to be in on the session, and the presentation that you have made has covered very wide scope as well as been extremely practical by giving an action plan. I think it has more than met the expectation on what can be done and whether it can be done and what can be done. We have a large number of questions, sir, and what we have tried to do is we have tried to cluster it. The first section deals with understanding of China from the background. So I'll start with the first question in that cluster, sir. It has been over 100 years of communism in China. It has adapted, gained strength. The party has ruled for more than 7 decades. What are the cultural and historical reasons for its survival and strength, and to what extent can the CCP be credited with this growth story?
Okay, that's an interesting question, but it's a historical question. I will answer it, but I am more interested in action-oriented questions for the future. I think it's a reality. The Communist Party of China, their dominance. So let me mention 2 or 3 points. In the 19th century, China was in a more pathetic condition than India, in that India had 1 colonial ruler. China was split up under 4 colonial rulers. So the Chinese have a very bad memory of colonialism and the humiliation that they went through. They also went through atrocities of Japan in the Second World War, where they lost millions of people during the Nazi Japan aggression. So it is this humiliation that they want to come up away from, and all this is powering the party. Now, Mao unified the party. He achieved the revolution. There was a great saga of the Long March, as you know. The world believed that Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists would win. But this ragged army of only 6,000 people from the rural area, that's a brilliant leadership, and they finally got control. Since then, they've been very aggressive. 1949, they set up their republic. 1953, they occupied Tibet. Nehru conceded it without a fight. Sardar Patel and Rajaji said, no, it has to be an autonomous region, a buffer state between India and Tibet. Chinese were also very disappointed with Gorbachev for the perestroika and glasnost. And they learned a lesson that you never should allow this, because then the Communist Party will break up, it will go away, and they have a very poor view of democracy. They are globally presenting the thesis that Communist Party is the best form of government. So that is why in 1989, Tiananmen, they ruthlessly killed the youth of China who demonstrated for democracy. There is no chance of democracy for the foreseeable future. They are now controlling the internet. They're controlling the capitalists who have become too big. They are jailing a successful farmer because he is very successful. So I think the party is in power, and also very unfortunate developments. Deng Xiaoping brought in some democratic elements. He said not more than 2 terms for every president of the party. But Xi has got that amended. He is lifetime president. So he has a great advantage over all prime ministers and presidents of the US. Angela Merkel will retire. Trump is gone. Biden may have 1 or 2 terms, but Xi will be there. He is 68. He may have another 20 years to go, 15 years to go. The party is behind him. So it's a serious threat for us. Next.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. That's a very quick coverage of a lot of many points, which many of the viewers will give them an understanding of where a lot of this is coming from. The next question is, sir, what are the drivers of the China growth story if you keep aside the political system? And to what extent can India learn from these drivers and replicate?
Yeah, China learned initially from Singapore. Deng Xiaoping sought advice from Lee Kuan Yew because Singapore was a model state. It had the first world's per capita income. China is not anywhere near that. It will not reach that for a long time. China's per capita is $10,000. The US European is $50,000 plus. So Deng had the humility to consult Singapore. Also, the Chinese were looking at the success of the Asian tigers, what were called the new industrializing countries like South Korea, Taiwan, even Vietnam, to some extent Indonesia in some areas. They had all achieved 8 to 10% growth. India was dismissing all of them as low population and not relevant to our country. Our governmental arrogance has been enormous in the first 20. In fact, people like M.K. Raju, I'm a president, 1971, came back from Singapore and put this proposal to the government. It was just laughed out of hand. But in 1991, thereafter, Narasimha Rao had very good interactions with Lee Kuan Yew and looked at the Singapore model and adopted some of the lessons there. So the Chinese were determined to equalize with Japan. That was their biggest bugbear. Second World War memories, very bad memories, and catch up with these smaller countries. So 1971, you may remember, they invited Kissinger and Nixon to come. They went as if they were junior subalterns. Mao was holding a huge court. The reason being to split China and Russia, and Chinese took full advantage of it, and they had to grow. If you don't have democracy, you need higher growth because the people are restive, they are dissatisfied, they don't have them. Democracy allows people to accept mediocrity, low growth, low performance. It is more tamasic. But under a dictatorship, people become more rajasic, more rebellious. And what bribes them is high economic growth, high consumption. That's what the party did.
Thank you, sir. I think, so China has learned quite a bit from many of the other countries. And yes. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong in India trying to learn from them. That's it, sir, for this cluster. I now hand it over to Professor Sudhakar Rao for the next cluster.
Thank you, Professor Prasad. So thank you very much for your responses. You have been patiently answering the questions raised by our audience. So the next in line is the fact that India has imported, both in terms of value and volume, the goods and the products higher than what we have exported to China. Now, China is the top import partner for India. What are the linkages and what is the role of dumping in this? Can actually India decouple itself from the Chinese manufacturing?
Well, we are decoupling partly because of military reasons, security reasons, and not to add to their economic power, which will go into military muscle. But in the long run, there is a great benefit in trading with China. What we should not do is to allow the unfavorable balance of trade to go on increasing and increase their power. So China has also followed some of the steps of Japan for a long time: currency manipulation, artificially keeping the currency low, not allowing it to rise. With the kind of exports they have and income they have, the yuan should have become hard currency now. Indian tire manufacturers know that they have kept the yuan deliberately depressed to be cheap products for sales. So I think we should solve the military problem, reach some level of peace and trade, but export more to China. So that is up to us to increase our scale. It comes back to that problem. The scale of manufacturing, mega projects, conceive huge schemes for the domestic plus. So India and China put together, you have a market of 3 billion, 40% of the world. So we are not attacking that market. We are not even attacking our domestic market. It is underdeveloped. So I think there is a huge role for industry with the support of government and officials to do. So there are complementary areas where we should take help from China.
Right, right. On the point that you mentioned that with the government support, how Indian firms can compete. Any specific lessons or suggestions that you have, one or two, in this area? Because we have heard from you the broad trends. So in terms of specific measures, one for, say, government and couple for Indian firms.
I think like the Chinese, we have to really go to the better state governments. So an industrial group with a mega plan should approach one of the 6 to 8 more advanced states in the country, more industry and business friendly states like Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and now on the East Coast, Orissa is coming up nicely. And so it is not at the federal union government level, it is at the state level that we identify the land, the water, the location, closeness to a port. So we have to do all the homework where it will make a successful project. And then we say, this is the equity we are putting in, this is the equity we want to get from overseas. this is the debt we need, this is the interest rate we can afford, but this is the employment it will create, this is the foreign exchange it will create. So they have to actually sell, market, explain repeatedly to a initially bored, uninterested, maybe even hostile listener. But this is a trusteeship role that Gandhi talked about. If we are trustees of Indian business and Indian people, we should put up with all problems and difficulties on the way. So, so I think first begin with the state governments. I think there are cases where people have gone to a particular district magistrate, district government. For example, when you set up industrial parks, IT parks, like in Tirunelveli, there is a Tele Valley that has been done, or this Zoho in Tenkasi, Tamil Nadu, creating rural jobs. So you can go down to a friendly district level, state level, and then maybe 2 or 3 neighboring states together and go to the center only when it is absolutely essential, when you want mega financing.
This is very interesting, and it sounds unconventional from the belief that the common man has.
Well, let me tell you some examples of how this has been done. This is how Reliance developed in Jamnagar. The initial project for refinery investment, the land. This is how Geo has developed also. Both the retail and the telecom. L&T got permission for a special port in Western Gujarat for cement exports and imports of raw materials. Adani's have similarly been able to. I think in India we use terms like crony capitalism and so on, but I think we have to follow Abraham Lincoln. So people went and complained to him that the generals drank. He said, "I don't care as long as they win their battles. Tell me which brand whiskey General Grant is drinking, I'll send it to the others." So I think we should not be looking for lily white business people and so on, but back energy, drive, vision, ambition for the sake of the country. So the economy will benefit much more than we might lose in a few bits of taxes here and there. So I think there is an anti-business attitude which has been around, what Margaret Thatcher called in the UK as the culture of envy rather than the culture of emulation. We are after the 91 reforms, we are beginning to cross it, but I think we at a very low intensity energy level. So, for example, Ola has had negotiations with the state government, got that land next to Hosur, put up that huge plant. So it is possible to do so. Maybe coming from overseas, they have less blinkers and preconceived notions than we have. There is a mutual prejudice between industry and government here. Still, some bits remnants of it which we have to clear up. Okay. I get sometimes despondent and sometimes angry. You must forgive me.
Well, no, very, very interesting, quite pertinent, actionable recommendations that you have given. State level approach, district level approach, which is pretty unconventional and at the same time doable kind of suggestions that you have made. I'm very happy to learn that culture of envy should turn into culture of emulation, as you narrated with an example or quote from Margaret Thatcher. So great, sir. Now, another cue from your response is that we need to build active cooperation. Can you suggest 1 or 2 areas how we can build active cooperation between India and China?
I think green energy is one area where we have a common interest. Climate change has now become a very serious issue. Some people are saying this is the decade, decisive decade where things have to be done. China has strengths in renewable energy, green energy, the solar and wind energy. We also have some strengths and we can work together on that. Electric automobiles, they are the world leaders in electric automobiles area now. Pharmaceutical ingredients, they are advanced and we should be able to source it from them better, larger quantities. Maybe even create joint India-China investment projects to improve the economic relationship. Great, and sir. The entire functional lessons of marketing, manufacturing, finance that I have talked about.
Yes.
So that we're studying individual companies.
Against that framework which you mentioned and these areas of cooperation, this is pretty interesting to learn from. Green energy, climate, pharmaceutical, so on and so forth. So in your reading, what is the impact of COVID on the growth potential between India and China? How did it impact India and how did it impact China?
You see, China is India's problem and opportunity for decades, for centuries, for 1,000 years. COVID is a 1 or 2 year phenomenon. When it's around, it hits us too much, but it is a seasonal kind of problem. We have to look at the long-term reality of living next to China, and China already being 5 to 7 times larger than the Indian GDP. That is a real problem. So I have not talked much about COVID. In some other talk 6 months ago, I talked about COVID and the need for COVID dharma on the part of citizens and what those with good health can do in the community. But I think in the light of this historic civilizational battle between India and China, COVID is nothing. I'm talking in terms of decades.
Okay, right, sir. One last question I have in this cluster of questions before I hand it over to Professor Prasad. And the question is, I mean, our understanding of China is very different. I'm talking about the common man's understanding is very, very different. Are the ethics and values the same in India and China?
You see, we have in theory, in the Vedanta and so on, very high concepts of ethics. But in practice, there is a huge gap. 1857 to 1947, 90 years, was in recent history the highest period of dharma in India. There was a period of selfless people who sacrificed their life, went to prison, took injuries from police beating. Since 1947, especially since the 1952 elections, ethics have been going down in India. Partly, we are responsible as citizens, business is responsible, but also some very unrealistic government policies, high levels of direct and indirect taxation, an attitude of suspicion and mistrust. So now after 1991 reforms and more reasonable taxes, like the 30% and the dream budget of Chidambaram and so on, I think now ethics in industry has risen a great deal. Ethics in politics will always be difficult. It is a competitive game. So I think the public as a whole and the government as a whole, there is a revival in values. In fact, in my second slide, I gave the title of Dharma Pracharak. In my life, I have been two kinds of Pracharak. The first, I was a management Pracharak, and beginning in 1980, I was also a values Pracharak, Dharma Pracharak. So I think the corporate governance, ESG, environment, social and governance responsibilities, ethics, independent directors, audits, proxy firms. So the SEBI, after G. Ramakrishna made the reforms there, SEBI has been getting better and better. So I think overall business ethics in India have improved a great deal. And also a number of NGOs, community level ethics have improved a great deal. I think civil servants want to work in an ethical environment. So I think since the early death of Shastri, unfortunately, tragic, 1966, and the ascent to power of Indira Gandhi, that was the beginning of decline of Indian ethics. It is a wrong role model. It is a violation of Shrestha Dharma. Gita says, Yad yadacharati shresthaha, tatadeva itaro janaha, sayat pramanam kurute lokastad anuvartate. So we set wrong standards. It was okay to be corrupt. Prime Minister is doing it. Why can't I do it? But in the last 20, 30 years, there is some improvement. There are some parties which are more honest. But I think all of them have realized that to come back to power, you have to do some good. So even if there is some corruption, there has to be delivery of social services, new benefits, and people are switching their votes. So as the electorate becomes more assertive, I think India is much more ethical today than during emergency, which I lived through.
Great, sir. Is it the same thing in China, sir?
Yeah, I think generally the Chinese have, before the Communist Party, followed the Buddhist ethics. I think there has been more transparency, consistency. So they have a strong work ethics, definitely. And there is also an ethic between the consumer and the manufacturer, multiple stakeholders and their service and expectations, consistency in that. Again, it is within the party that there is problems of power struggle and so on. That is internal. But society as a whole, I think they could not have succeeded so well unless they delivered on their promises of volume, quality, time for these massive exports in the world.
Great. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I also want to welcome Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Mahendra Reddy, and the Registrar of ICFAI Foundation for Higher Education. That is our deemed university in Hyderabad. Welcome to both of you, sir and madam. Now I hand it over back to Professor R. Prasad for the next cluster of questions.
Thank you, sir. There have been many insights in this, a lot of actionables also. Some points essentially about strategy: go to the state government, get your work done, assume a trusteeship role, be humble while doing that. The areas where we could start off with, and lastly, a very nuanced view about how ethics is being seen both in India and in China. These have been extremely valuable, sir. Now I'm shifting the focus to education. And thank you, Dr. Mahendra Reddy and the Registrar for joining the deliberations. So this is about education. One of the strong reasons for the Chinese success has been the way they have approached their human resources. India has a huge human resource potential, and it could be a demographic dividend, it could be a disaster. So how do we leverage this, sir? What do we learn from the Chinese as far as education and employability go on this?
You see, again, we have to make up for a long period of historical errors that we have made. From the first 5-year plan, the government, instead of bothering about the modern temples of India and commands of economy, should have been spending much more on education. This is known worldwide, in India also, that 3% to education, 4 to 5% on health of the budget. That's what we should have been spending. But we have been hovering around 1% or below. The universal public education, government schools available to all the children of the country, Chakla Commission's report, 1964, on education, several reports later, they have not been fulfilled. And research studies from Harvard and other places show Sarkari schools in the rural areas are not functioning. The teacher doesn't come. There is one room, one teacher teaching all the subjects. So I think in desperation, center and states allowed private sector to come into education. That is an improvement. But I think the private sector has charges fees and so on. It has its profit motive. We must improve our public education system and make sure that every child, and even within that, there has been a gross neglect of the girl child in health, nutrition, as well as in literacy and education. So if the mother is undernourished and undereducated, then it has a generational effect on the next 1 or 2 generations. So I think we have been sleeping, we have been pompous, arrogant at government level, and not taking cognizance of the neighbors, the world around us, going ahead of us. And now I think we are catching up, just like the Indian cricket team mess up the first innings and try your best on the second innings. But never mind, I am a student of management. One principle in management is that there is no hopeless situation. Any situation that you give me, my duty is to pick it up and improve it from there. So we have to improve India from where it is now and do those massive investments. We are now doing only in food grains. Government is giving for 800 million people free food grains. That's a survival thing. It doesn't add to the human resource development and skills of the people. So I think primary and technical education and good health. This is very important. People are living longer. The inequalities have risen in the meantime. Some classes are living longer, some are dying earlier, and there is damage of the brain, cretinism. My wife worked for UNICEF for several years on issues of nutrition, mother and child care. the picture is horrendous.
So do you have any suggestions for the private sector, particularly in higher education, with respect to what it can contribute?
Yeah. I think private sector everywhere where worldwide where governments underperform, it is a private sector which is to make it up. Where there's a market failure, they have to produce the goods themselves, and you will see this. 20 years ago, the leading IT companies, I was very happy to see Infosys, Wipro, Tech Mahindra, they would go to campuses in the second level and third level towns and work with the teachers and enroll more students, interview them there, bring them and have a special extra coaching class for them. So you have to create your own raw material, your own human resources, and not continue to blame the market, because there's a huge market opportunity outside in the world. So I think they have showed us the way. Open centers everywhere. Go to Gurgaon, go to Chandigarh, go to Bhubaneswar, backward areas, set up your development centers, take local talent. So I think our people have intelligence, IQ. They need other skills of job. So I think it is the industry's duty to invest at the recruitment level as well as continuously throughout the career and not depend on government. Nowhere in the world, governments give ready-made products to industry. You have to do re-education, further development. You can work with institutions to improve. So I think this is the industry's responsibility. There is no point in sitting and crying. You have to be proactive and create your resources and what is available.
Thank you, sir. Anything specific for private universities and institutions?
Yeah, I think the private universities have a great mission, great role to play. They are demonstrating that, first of all, you can be financially solvent in providing education. At the same time, they can be great innovators of new methods, technologies of learning worldwide. They can collaborate, liaise with private universities worldwide. In the long run, I think there may be one or two state universities in every state, but majority private universities coming up. Ashoka University is an example. Private universities should also reinvest in their growth, have new campuses. They should invest more in R&D, collaborative with industry. They should leverage that they are not weighed down by huge size affiliated colleges, reservations. So they have this campus model, which is a very powerful one, and you have captive students there 24 hours of the day, and we should creatively design and use this period. So those 4 or 5 years on a private university campus should be much more valuable than 10 years in a public university. And the growth and the global competitiveness, benchmarking. And private universities should also stress on our graduates, they need to stay in this country and work for this country. Go abroad to study and have some experience. I think the way China has developed, it has retained its talent. It sent them abroad, they studied, they experienced, they came back. A few may have stayed back, but they are used for espionage. But they have got their talent back. It is my thesis, it has been always that if educated, intelligent people of every country stayed in their own home country, the world will be more developed and will less inequality. We have lost a huge brain drain of 4 to 5 million people to the US. It's nice they're achieving something, we are proud of them, but I think in 1 or 2 generations, there will be no remittances, there will be no, they may see investment opportunities. People take great pride in some Indians being head of Microsoft or Google and so on. But their boards will not invest in India because the CEO is from this country. They will look at hard criteria of investment. If anything, the CEO will bend over backward that India has to be an extra good case to invest here. So I think give your people a sense of life mission, an India mission. Wherever I'm invited for university, college lectures, I talk about this India mission.
Thank you, sir. That's indeed a very valuable point about how one can invest a sense of purpose into one's alumni so that they're able to come back and contribute.
Research finds that if an Indian student abroad has one professor on campus in India with whom he has a good relationship, a mentor relationship, the probability of his returning goes up.
Very insightful, sir. Very insightful. So the next question is on innovation and what universities can do. And the data in India says that both the investment into R&D and the contribution by universities into this portion of the R&D has been very less, very pathetic, in fact. So what can we do, both public and private universities? Are there specific initiatives that you'd like to suggest, specific ideas you'd like to suggest for such institutions to drive up the R&D in collaboration?
Especially in the science and engineering technical departments, there is scope for R&D. I think what you must do is to have a very clear focused strategy. General talk about R&D is very woolly and loose. So in your catchment area, in a radius of, let's say, 100 kilometers, what are the industries? What are their strengths? Who are some leaders? What do they need? And can you have a collaborative project? Your faculty and students work for them and give them good terms. You learn, they benefit, and make small beginnings in these identified high success, low-hanging fruits. Then multiply, expand, scale up. So I think we have to begin small and work up.
Thank you, sir. That's a very practical suggestion. In terms of, so the next question is related to, in which areas should the graduates and entrepreneurs in India today focus on? Where do you think the growth will be, and which areas they should learn and invest in?
I think in the last 3-4 years, one of the most encouraging things in India is the explosion of startups. I remember the speech the Prime Minister made in 2014 in August 15th in the Red Fort, calling for Startup India, Stand Up India. And at that time, there was a lot of cynicism about it. But I think now we have not only startups, we have unicorns, billion-dollar valuation. You look at Zomato, such a simple thing as a food delivery business. But yeah, there is a huge demand, you have to do it well. So I think this arrogant idea that it has to be high-tech and science and so on, consumers want simple things in life. That's what the retail industry is doing. That's the whole base of Amazon. So I think entrepreneurship. So to graduating engineers and MBAs, I would suggest that go for about 3 to 5 years of experience just to learn about an organization, learn about skills, how to run it, learn about the balance sheet and profit and loss account, the basics of business from the plant to the market. But all the time, keep in mind your burning vision of being an entrepreneur and come out. But a few may be so confident, the idea may be so clear, you don't even need to go for corporate experience. Go straight into and be prepared to fail initially. And you may have heard the statement, fail and fail early and learn early, try, resilience. So I think the entrepreneurial culture is catching up in India. Between 1950 and 1990, business had a bad name in India. Nehru himself said profit is a dirty thing. He was very hostile to profit. So the adversarial relationship between Sarkar and business has changed now into a partnership. Consultations on policy, ideas on both sides, consultations on even the annual budget. So the entrepreneurial culture, I think the people of India always wanted it. We have the Chaturvarna, the Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya. So the business community had a good role, had a recognized role. There is a Vaishya Dharma. So I think that we have just started. There's a great future for entrepreneurship in India, and you should encourage your people. And you may also have in the final year 1 or 2 terms of special courses on entrepreneurship, not only theory, but also case studies, visiting speakers. Go back to Joseph Schumpeter, 1912, and he talked about creative destruction. So innovation, new business is very important. The old one, we should not wait for it to die out of illness. It should be killed by better new businesses. So I think this is very important, research and entrepreneurship.
I have one switch question, sir, with your permission. From
Yes.
what you have just answered, I would like to ask Professor Prasad one question from there onwards. In the newly created, launched online MBA program, Professor Prasad, do we have room for building entrepreneurial spirit in terms of its methodologies, program structure, and the practicum? Please explain what kind of room that we have created for building this spirit of rising called entrepreneurship.
Thank you. I just go back in time. I spent a decade as an entrepreneur before I joined ICFAI. And what it taught me is that there's nothing which will treat you like entrepreneurship. I mean, it's a 10-time MBA one shot. You learn so much when you're an entrepreneur.
Exactly.
So, what we have tried to do is that we have hubbed the entire course, though we have not positioned it as such, but we have hubbed the entire course around entrepreneurship. So if you take each of the basic principles of the management, the basic courses, that the fundamentals don't change. But what you can leverage in that course with respect to what the consumer expects today, the technology changes which come in today, if you're able to make those suggestions for each of those courses at a course level, you can build it up into what we call our entrepreneurship practicum. So what do employers look for? Employers today look for people who can innovate. They need young brains to innovate. They want them to come out with ideas which are very practical, do it and show it to them. So if you're able to do and show it across your courses and able to hub it around one course, then your MBA is your idea for a startup. Maybe you'll materialize it a little later with manifestation.
The point you made about consumer and the market is very important. In the 1970s and 80s, I used to read about and feel very sad. 1 million techno enterprises in India failed. At that time, our thinking was highly production oriented. Just because you can make a product, there is no reason to make it. Who wants it? Who will buy that product? At what price? What is your cost? So I think you have to begin with the customer and the market and work back. So just an engineering degree and technical qualification and some published bank finance does not make an entrepreneur. At that time, we said it from IIM Calcutta, there were no listeners. We have to learn things the hard way. Now it is so crystal clear that all business has to begin with the customer. What is the need? What is the unmet need? What are you trying to fulfill? If it's already being met, how can you do it better than the existing products? Then you work back. I think this is very good. And entrepreneurs have a huge opportunity. India is a vast untapped market. It has a huge human resource base and for global markets. So it is a dream. And you just need the confidence and the maturity to exploit these two advantages, domestic market and domestic talent. Where will you get this in these numbers? Germany will decline, Japan population will decline, and they will not allow immigrants to come in. It's a pathetic state. We will get there in 30, 40 years. But before that, we should use this talent.
Just wanted to add a couple of points, Professor Sudhakar Rao. I think, we recently heard the Nandan Nilekani mentioning that, he's now competing, he's trying not to lose his employees to startups. A lot of the engineers who come to him have passions and entrepreneurship in their mind, and they're going to startups and they're trying to do something about it. I think that's the wave right now, and we are very happy that we are in a situation where we do that. So if we can build on it and try to do something, whether it's for a corporate or whether it's a social venture or whether it's an environmental venture, I think there's a lot of space, and they'll go out and get their funding from wherever they can try.
Can you also follow the IIT Madras model of creating a startup camp, a park in your university? An incubation.
Yes, sir.
Park.
Yes. Sir. Thank you, sir. We've just started with an university institution innovation council, and all these things are being noted, and we will certainly do that, sir. Back to Professor Sudhakar.
Yes, thank you very much. I think there is a lot of method, strategic action points for private entities, including private universities, that we looked at. Sir, I have last two questions for you where I would like to request your views. The first one is, how do we bring about the mind shift with respect to India reclaiming or rediscovering its place in trade, might, and economy?
Let me summarize and recollect some of the points. First, we have to have a burning desire to put India on the world economic map. Before the British came, historians tell us that India had 25% of the world trade share. It has come down to 1%, pathetic. So there must be a passionate desire to put India back on the world trading map. Doesn't matter where you manufacture, but you must sell to the world. Manufacture some in India, some abroad. Second is a great deal of confidence that imperialism, colonialism, bad economic policies between 1950 and 1990 kept us back. But the underlying potential is always there, will always be there in the Indian civilization, in the Indian people. So confidence and a kind of what Obama calls audacity. I have had throughout my life very high level of audacity. Some people may have called me impractical and so on. I believed in this country. I came back to this country. And I think from where I came, it has come up enormously. And it has huge potential. My only regret is that it has not yet achieved its potential. So one, we must remember our history. We were a great trading nation. Two, that we still have that potential. Three, we are among the high IQ people of the world. What we lack, there are four dimensions in competencies. Let me just very quickly recapitulate that model. You have heard about it. KASH, knowledge, attitudes, skills, and habits. We are high on knowledge and poor on the other three. IIT graduates for a long time have had knowledge, but don't know what to do on a factory shop floor. The workers and the supervisors don't have respect for them. So you have to have practical hands-on working experience, skill, and keep learning new skills. I think in the last 5 years, we have realized this: National Skill Development Corporation, sectoral skill development, state-wise skill development. So I think we are now investing in skill development and not only training, retraining, updating. Attitudes are a huge problem in India. Arrogance, ego, non-cooperation, poor communication, poor interpersonal relations, not being a team player, so individualistic. Even in the Olympics, we send a large contingent and the shooting squad has an internal problem there. Pathetic. You go to Tokyo and you have internal conflicts and mess up the whole competition. So we are good at individual events, but not in the attitude of working as a team with humility for a larger purpose. And finally, habits. I think good ideas, good knowledge, and practices have to be frozen into habits. This has been the great strength of Germany, Japan, Korea. They still follow that routine. Same time to bed, same time to wake up, early to office, work, weekends, relaxation. So I think there must be some kind of a nishta, concentration, self-discipline. I think the COVID has had one benefit. People at home, working from home, have had to find out and graduate. Those who developed a daily routine succeeded. Home time. So I follow three principles: work, exercise, diet. Exercise is very important. I exercise 3 times a day. And even medical people tell us it's so simple. 40 years now, I've been sleeping at 10 p.m., waking up at 5 a.m., day after day, including weekends, national holidays. It gives me 17 hours. It's a huge advantage. You do what you want to do with that time, but there must be a habit of regularity, punctuality, discipline, work habits, life habits. For example, this Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, that was a great campaign. It instilled some habits into our people. The climate change, green economy, circular economy, this requires habits in people, where they put their waste and how they recycle it. So I think we are very lax people without steady, disciplined habits. So these things, the attitude, skill, and habits are critical. Knowledge is not enough. IQ is no longer enough. You need EQ. And at leadership levels, you need SQ, spiritual quality. You must be a karma yogi. Too many of our people are karmacharis. Everybody can be a karmachari, the sweeper, the turner, the fitter can be. So what is the difference? You do the same work, but the attitude is different. You do it for the organization, you do it for the country. you do it for the people, then God gives you energy, enormous energy. You are never tired. Selfishness is the core cancer.
Lovely. I think you have asked us to be cash rich, knowledge, attitude, skills, and habits. And of course, the framework is about having a burning desire and the confidence that we can do it because it's in us, in our civilization and culture and history. So we need to actually build it and believe that we can rediscover our place in the world map. Fantastic, sir. One last question. Learning from your talk, looking at the positive things, what are the, even if there are very few, what are the few areas, one or two areas where India as a society and industry is better than China? And what are the reasons for being so and how we can build upon it towards reaching our goals?
I think the IT technical skills is an area where we are clearly demonstrated great strength, and our IT companies are recruiting in lakhs. Cognizant has just announced today, plan to recruit 100,000 people today. Infosys, TCS are all, TCS is taking 300,000 people this year. So this IT talent, we have huge potential in our agricultural business, which is undeveloped. The land area, the water that we have, and out of that, if we allow agribusiness to be developed, and the World Bank said many years ago that India can be the granary of the world. We have the sunshine, we have the monsoons, and if this land was more productive, global standards of productivity per hectare. On the other hand, Punjab and Haryana, the farmers are agitating. They are sticking to wheat and rice, which are not the right crops, highly water intensive. Water table is going down, drought. They should switch to pulses. Horticulture. Then dairy. We are the world's largest dairy industry, way ahead of China and all the other big countries. Dairy should be a huge export possibility. On the other hand, Europe has had a butter mountain for years. So I think we should begin from the rural areas, keep people there, and build this movement. So agriculture and agri-products, agri-business has great potential. And our traditional textiles, the skills that our people have, the designs, and if we give them the technology, the branding and the marketing support, I think the industry has done well. Exports are doing well. And now we have developed, in the last 50 years, through companies like Bajaj, Hero Honda, TVS Motors, great skills in automobile components. We can be not only suppliers to our auto companies, but global suppliers in automobile companies. The issue is scaling up, putting the investment up front, putting high technology. Investment is one, the latest technology, and train our workers in artificial intelligence and robotics, so the individual productivity will go up. And in fact, we could flood the world with these components and so on. We have problem in the finished product because that is an R&D and a marketing challenge. Those are capital intensive. For example, why the IT industry? Last 20 years, we have been suggesting that they should go on to IT products. But IT products have two problems. One, you have to have huge R&D for a product to compete with Microsoft and so on. And second, global distribution, brand building. I hope some of them will do it at some point. It's a big challenge. We have the talent, but we don't have the managerial and capital resources to do it now.
Awesome, sir. Awesome. That's a brilliant session. And to the last question that I asked, the response has been pretty interesting and positive, focusing on our strengths. IT, agri-businesses like horticulture, dairy, traditional business like textiles, and we can flood the world with auto components. It gives us a lot of confidence when we listen to you. And that has been for the last 90 minutes listening to you, for me, as well as my colleagues and all the members on the show. I cannot thank you enough, sir, for delivering this session, which has covered a canvas as large as India plus China together, in terms of the magnitude, in terms of the impact. And I'm very, very sure all of us stand to learn and gain from this. And more importantly,
this is my mission. I'm
yes,
past 80, and I accept all invitations for web speaking. I have a talk to a Bangalore group on 1st September. I'm speaking to Globes in Calcutta Business School on 13th August. 26th, I'm speaking at the Association of Indian Management Schools. I hope you are a member.
Yes.
You asked me on the 14th July, 30th July, I accepted straight away. I clear other engagements and take these opportunities. And I've had the chance to talk to 100 plus of your participants. It's a great opportunity. And I hope all of them will internalize these ideas and do their best. Not just appreciate the talk, but not forget it tomorrow, next week, but do something with it. There are people who remember my talk 10, 20 years later. So it can flower at any time, but keep the seeds within you, keep it growing.
Fantastic. I think there's someone on the show who has recollected your talk, which you delivered at Visakhapatnam 35 years back. So we will definitely remember your talk and the lessons we carry forward for implementation. And I'm sure all the members who have joined today will also do the same thing. We are going to summarize the talk. We are going to put it on the YouTube. We are going to put the text format of the summary on our website as well. And I will share that with you, sir, in due course of time, probably in about 48, 72 hours.
In the chat box, I saw a request from Mr. Charles Savage from Germany that he would like a report or a video recording. You please keep in mind and send it to him.
I will definitely do that, sir. It's my privilege and a great honor for hosting you, along with my esteemed colleague, Professor Prasad, in the presence of our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Mahendra Reddy, and also the Registrar for the University.
Thank you very much. I admire ICFAI's energy initiative every week, this kind of a talk. Fantastic. Keep it going.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
If I may, because of my age, give you my Ashirwad for success.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what we had, a huge canvas of learning from Dr. Athreya. We will see you again next Friday at 6:30 p.m. And till then, please do take care. The pandemic is not over and we might have third wave. So all of you, please stay safe. And we are all safe only when each one of us is safe. Thank you very much and have a good evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.